started. Yep, this will be recorded. Again, my name's Juan Reyes, he, him pronouns, tenant organizer with Homeline. It's really I'm really honored to host this tonight and have the panelists that we have tonight. It's going to be a really great session for everyone. I hope everyone really enjoys it. Just a reminder for these series, this is a tenant organizing webinar. So we won't be offering any legal services or advice in this webinar, but we do encourage folks on this next slide, if you do have any legal concerns and you would like to seek any advice, please call Homeline's English-speaking lines. We have a toll-free number for those joining in Greater Minnesota. We have a Spanish-speaking line, Somali-speaking line, and a Hmong-speaking line. So please take advantage of those resources and reach out to those sources. Yeah, Homeline provides free and legal, low-cost organizing, educational, and advocacy services so that tenants throughout Minnesota can solve their own rental problems. We work to improve public and private policies related to rental housing by involving tenants directly in the process. Keep moving on forward. I'm super excited to present the speakers tonight. We have Fatima Mohammed joining tonight. She's a housing organizer with ACER. We have Ricardo Perez, who's a board member of Pueblos de Lucha y Esperanza. We also have Rebecca Chang, who's the organizing director for Minnesota 8, and then myself. But the other three are going to be mostly doing a lot of talking today, so shout out to them and thank you to them. Yeah, and I will hand it over to Fatima to start sharing. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fatima Mohammed. I am the housing organizer at ACER. I've been with ACER for 2 years, working on their housing policy and tenant leadership, all things housing. And that's about me. I'll pass it on to Ricardo.
Thank you, Fatima. My name is Ricardo Perez. I use he, him pronouns. I am a coalition organizer for the Alliance and a board member for Pueblos de Lucha y Esperanza. That translates to People's Hopes and Struggles. And we're a faith-based organization that promotes justice, hope, in campaigns across the region and the whole state, directly with immigrant communities, Spanish-speaking community, etc. So I'll make sure to drop the website on the chat, but I'll pass it to Rebecca.
Hi, good morning or good evening. Well, that came out of nowhere. My name is Rebecca. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I'm calling from Minneapolis. I am the organizing director of Minnesota 8, and that's the number 8. And we do direct support work of Southeast Asian individuals who are facing detention and deportation. And we also fight for systemic change in Minnesota and also nationally to make Minnesota and the US safer for immigrants and refugees. And I'll pass it back to Fatima to continue on ACER, right?
Yeah, so ACER is a nonprofit organization. We're based in the northwestern suburbs. We serve the northwestern suburbs, but our office right now is in Brooklyn Park. And we have 4 main areas of service. So one is economic development, another is health equity, and then civic engagement, and I do housing organizing. So for housing, like I said, we work on tenant leadership, tenant power building, policy advocacy, policy analysis. And for economic development, we work with the micro and small businesses and increasing their capacity and helping them in any way that they need. For health equity has been focused on public health, specifically for the past 2 years. It's been vaccinations and testing. Right now, they're transitioning slightly into nutrition and the monkeypox, AIDS, all those things. And civic engagement is getting people to vote and to turn out and to participate in their civic life. I'll pass it to Juan.
Yeah, Fatima, would you like to share on your experience organizing in mixed status communities and organizing?
Sure.
And housing related. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. So for us it's actually what I have a lot more experience on is organizing communities that are like on vulnerable immigration status, because usually people usually don't share their status in terms of like whether they're documented and their family member is undocumented. But what they will share is that, for example, one person will say, I have a green card and I can't move until all of my children's green card have arrived at this house, because there's a very good likelihood that if we move, our immigration paperwork will be compromised, and the length and time that it takes alone is not worth the move. Or people will worry that if organizing will, I'm sorry, one second. People will worry that like if organizing against their landlord will be, you know, a deterrent, or like will be a barrier to them receiving naturalization. So like during the process, they you know, any sort of like, it's already hard enough to organize, but any sort of pushback against any kind of authority is very, people are very hesitant. So that's really hard. But yeah, I from like my own personal experience, like I remember when we first came to the United States, and we didn't have a and so we didn't have a green card yet, but and we were waiting for our stuff. And I remember like somebody came to knock at our door, and now I know they were the census people, but at the time they asked like a bunch of like to what at the time seemed like very like personal questions, like, oh, how many people live here? And we thought it was immigration. And so we see a lot of that when we door knock. People are hesitant to, I don't know, to open their door and like to share unless you look familiar, or you're like, oh, I'm so and so's friend, or and I think that's what has helped me so far. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Fatima. We'll hand it over to Ricardo to talk about Pueblo.
Thank you, Farumo. That was awesome. I'm a big fan of Acer, so I really appreciate your work. I know and have seen the results of it out there. So thank you for your time. And yeah, thank you for your time, everyone here today. I'm very happy to share what I've known in my, you know, experience through work and life about working with mixed status families. So I just want to talk about the picture here real quick. It's a really cool one. So on the picture, this was an event back in 2018 that Pueblos organized with pre-manufactured communities across all of Hennepin County and Anoka County and Dakota County. So it was like a big gathering, like 15 communities came out. I see some names there: Arden Manor, Cedar Knolls, Rambush. So big gathering of people. Antonia Alvarez, it's somewhere around there. She's the co-founder of Pueblos. I dropped the link on the chat so you can explore the organization. But I just want to talk about the picture because that was a very joyous moment. Also, Senator Patricia Torres right there in the kind of like middle, holding my then a baby, now 4-year-old daughter. So I bring my family to these things because it feels like family. And it feels like family because I am an immigrant too. I was born and raised in Mexico, and I moved to the US when I was 18 years old. Unlike other folks, I was able to come here with a student visa, and then I transitioned into a legal permanent resident status, or a green card holder. And also recently became a citizen. So immigration and immigrant families for me are a big deal. Like I am a part of a family that is mixed, not in immigration status, but just in culture. So anyways, I prepared something just super quick to share with you about my experience. And for me, I started as an interpreter, and when I was interpreting, it was like a spy. So I got to hear and learn what people were experiencing. And without a time, without a doubt, time and time again, immigrant Spanish-speaking people represented a big client of the public assistance recipients. That's who, you know, so the reasons why they were seeking public assistance were always kind of connected to some sort of exploitation or violation of people's humanity or human rights. Either landlord using fear tactics to get tenants to accept any terms or payment increases, or work places that exploit them in how many hours they work, or where they had to go to work and how often or how many breaks they didn't get. And then the other very important thing is like the consequences that our immigrant families or mixed status families experience are very, very different than other communities. Some of our consequences include immigration and immigration enforcement. And that happens not only when a policy is passed or accepted, but it comes with the public narrative. A couple of years ago, when he shall not be named Republican president slash real, what do you call it, TV star personality, they started a war on immigrants with immigration policies that were directly targeting immigrants from specific geographies across the world, and in general with something like public charge. So in this meeting here, bringing you back to this meeting, the campaign that Pueblo was running was an organizing campaign. We weren't offering any direct assistance like something, right? We were offering the idea that we could organize, and with our community power, we can change the law. The change that we were seeking in this campaign was so everyone, regardless of their immigration status, could apply and receive state funding to fix their pre-manufactured homes. A lot of these homes are very old, and I remember walking into someone's kitchen and the ceiling was literally like falling in, and people don't have the funds to fix up their homes, you know? So there are programs, but they're not for us. So that's another part of the experience. It's some resources, programs, things that we don't have access to, like driver license. Sometimes we don't have being able to drive to work. And every time we leave our homes, it feels like we might not come back, you know? It's not up to us sometimes. Sometimes people get deported because they go pull over for a traffic violation. So again, the consequences are disproportionate, and they are threatening us in being uprooted, displaced, or removed from the country, you know? So anyways, all that being said, I guess that I also wanted to say that I'm also so proud of being an immigrant, because time and time again, regardless of the conditions of the building that we were door knocking or the pre-manufactured community that we were in, people were proud of their home. People lived in a clean house. People took care of their kids. Like, some cases are out there, right? But in general, though, these are good people, hardworking people that pay taxes. It's not like we don't pay taxes, bro. Like, we pay taxes, and we don't get to tap into that benefit that our taxes help create. And even worse, many times our tax dollars are used against us by funding programs that criminalize us or displace us or affect us negatively. So I guess that to conclude my intervention here, I would say, don't let immigrants get erased. We are out there, we exist, we are real. Our struggles are very real, and we do have hope of being able to live in a community that accepts us, includes us, and is actively finding solutions to help us. Because if it's only up to us, we cannot sometimes change it all, right? We need the help of allies like Homeline, or like people in the Suburban Hennepin Housing Coalition, or in other spaces that they take immigrant issues on their agendas. Because sometimes, because immigration is a federal issue, people don't want to touch it. They don't want to talk about it. The bar stops there. There's no more help if you are dealing with immigration issues. And I want to challenge that, right? We should always be inclusive of immigrants' need, ambition, and everything else. So I'll pass it back to you, Juan, or someone else. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ricardo, for challenging and reminding us to challenge narratives and not be complacent on those narratives. And reminding us of how valuable our immigrant communities are. Yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca, Minnesota 8. Rebecca, I just had this on there. Your slides are next, but please just indicate to me when you'd like me to move to the next slide. And yeah, thank you. I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Fatima and Ricardo, for sharing what you've shared. And I'm super excited to build on what you all have brought into the space already. So a little bit about myself. I also grew up in a mixed status family. So immigration has always been a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. And I just feel super lucky to be able to work in this space now. And Minnesota 8, we balance both direct services and organizing campaigns. So it's always a hard balance, but we try our best. And just a little bit of context for y'all to know is that for us, we support the Southeast Asian community, and 70% actually of Southeast Asian refugees who have deportation orders, it most often of the time it stems from criminal convictions that occurred decades ago when they first settled as refugees. So I'll talk about this during the presentation, but I just thought a little bit more context around the people we serve is super important. And thank you, Juan, for this picture. It must be one from one of those initial meetings from Minnesota 8, because I recognize a lot of folks. So it's such a beautiful picture. And we can go to the next slide. Today, I'm hoping to spend a little bit of time with you talking about Immigration Enforcement 101. So giving you all kind of a very brief overview or summary of what is immigration enforcement. We like to call that ICE sometimes. You probably have heard that in the news before. And a few tips about how to protect yourself and your neighbors. And this picture here is designed by this artist named Tori Hong. I put her name in the chat. She made it during the original Release Minnesota 8 campaign. Our organization started back in 2016 when 8 Cambodian men were picked up by ICE. So Tori made this really beautiful piece of art in 2016 when the families were trying to fight for their family members to be able to stay. Next slide, please. And just as Juan said in the beginning, I just want to give a quick note that the following information I'm giving is not legal advice. I'm a community organizer, not a lawyer. So I would really recommend for you to consult a lawyer or to reach out to us if you need to find a lawyer, because sometimes people have very specific situations, and I just don't want whatever I'm saying to be exactly shown as legal advice, but it's all recommendations. Next slide, please. And you can click next here too. I just want to talk about a couple of values for us to ground ourselves in tonight as I'm sharing this information with you all. The first is that all people deserve to live with dignity, safety, and liberation from state violence, regardless of their immigration status or conviction history. The second is that contact with the criminal legal system does not make someone bad or disposable. And the third means contact with the criminal legal system does not justify separating someone from their family and community, detaining them, or deporting them. And certainly, I know we all might be coming from different political backgrounds and might have different values that we are bringing, but I just wanted to share the values that I'm bringing and how this will affect all the work that we will do. So next slide, please. So I have just a quick slide here that explains a little bit about ICE, or that stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So ICE is a branch of this US department called the US Department of Homeland Security. And within ICE itself, it has a couple of little like branches in it. The one that is most commonly known is called Enforcement and Removal Operations. That one is the one that does all the detention and deportation and all of the horrible news that we hear around families being separated. And something that is really important to know as tenants, as housing advocates, is that oftentimes ICE doesn't do its work by itself. It really needs the help of local law enforcement, such as police and sheriffs, that basically do ICE's dirty work for it. Next slide, please. And as I'm talking about ICE, and I give you all that very brief summary, I want to talk a little bit about this. There's a lot of things in the slide, but I will go through it. This deportation pipeline for immigrants. So for people who are born outside of the US and don't have US citizenship, there is this very long pipeline that a very good friend of mine, an activist named Nikki Chow out of Seattle, they actually made this whole concept. A lot of you may have heard of something called the school to prison pipeline. This is the expanded version for immigrants, especially for Southeast Asian immigrants. So I'll give a shot at saying it out loud. It's very long. It's the US intervention to refugee displacement, to school, to prison, to detention center, to deportation pipeline. And the reason I want to bring this in is because the history of why Southeast Asian immigrants and refugees are here in the United States in the first place is because of US war in Southeast Asia. And that applies for many other immigrant communities as well. And whenever I do any sort of presentation, I always bring this in because we have to think about the large picture. How did people end up in the United States in the first place? It's because of war. It's because of the Vietnam War. It's because of the secret war in Southeast Asia. So that happened. And then many people were displaced due to poverty, due to war. And when refugees first came to the US, when they first came to Minnesota, they were often put in disinvested neighborhoods where they faced things like language and culture shock, isolation, trauma, and they really wanted to try to find acceptance, belonging, and protection. But that's really, really hard when you live in a place where the police are always on your block and they are causing a lot of harm to you and your family. So a lot of Southeast Asian refugees, especially in their teenage years and their young adult years in their 20s, got involved in gangs as a form of community. That was the only source of community they had. And unfortunately, because these Southeast Asian communities were so criminalized, that led a lot of people to be arrested by the police, brought to prison. But unlike US citizens who finish their prison sentence and go home, for Southeast Asian refugees and a lot of other refugees, after you finish your time in prison, you're actually directly transferred to ICE detention. So you spend months, sometimes even years there. And depending on the international situation, if your quote unquote home country, I put this in quotes because for many Southeast Asian people, they've been in the US since they were kids. So I don't really know if they consider Southeast Asia their home country, but if their country of origin is accepting deportees, they might be deported. And sometimes because the US has like agreements or doesn't have agreements, they don't get deported. So then they just end up getting to live back with their families. So I just really think this slide is important because I think it's really broad and also it sets the context to why immigrants are facing so many challenges. And it's not because immigrants are lazy or immigrants don't try hard enough. It's because literally there has been a history of war, people being forced to move and people being forced to live in areas where they didn't have the resources they need. And this definitely is still true today, even though this is the story of Southeast Asian immigrants and refugees who arrived in the 70s and 80s. So next slide, please. I'm not going to go into depth about this, but this is also another visual. We didn't make it. It comes out of California, but it also talks about the arrest to deportation pipeline. So how a police stop can lead all the way to ICE custody, just like how Ricardo brought up, like if somebody is undocumented and driving without a driver's license, that police stop gets them literally in this pipeline. And that is how someone ends up in ICE custody. And that is how someone can end up being deported and forced to go back to some other country. Next slide, please. So I want to really highlight how police fit into the pipeline, because I know for you all as tenants and housing advocates that, there's a lot of fear of the police, which is completely reasonable. And for immigrants, there is a lot of extra fear because, as I said earlier, the police, sometimes they cooperate with ICE. So here are 3 examples about how police play a role in this deportation pipeline. The first is that in some areas, not in all areas, police can act as immigration officers. So what that means is that they are basically like mini ICE officers. They can arrest people and have all the same powers as an ICE officer. So that's pretty scary. The second way that they can be a part of this pipeline is that sometimes they give ICE an office in the jail. So again, if we use that example that Ricardo brought up, someone who was undocumented, picked up while driving, this person goes to the jail. If ICE has an office in the jail, ICE could just walk down the hallway and interview that person. And if that person doesn't know how to speak English, and they don't know what to say, they don't know what their rights are, that will give ICE so much leverage and so much power in the case to deport them. And then the third example is that oftentimes police and sheriffs, they might share information. This might mean that ICE calls them and asks like, hey, do you have any immigrants right now in the jail? Or it can be the opposite, where the police actually pick up the phone and they say, oh, hey, ICE, I wanted to let you know we have an immigrant and you can come by to see them. Or sometimes it might be data sharing, so they can share the data of who is coming into the jail and if they are an immigrant or a refugee. So all of these are extremely dangerous ways that police collaborate with ICE. And unfortunately, some of these happen in Minnesota. Next slide, please. So yeah, I have a slide here. Just what does this look like in Minnesota? Because you're probably wondering, whoa, like, is this happening in my neighborhood? Is this happening in my community? And that is a really, really good question. And unfortunately, I don't have an easy answer for you because each city and county often has its own policies and rules. So I'll give you an example on the next slide about Minneapolis and Hennepin County. But I really encourage you all to also look up your own city and your own county to see what the rules are. And I'm happy to help you out too. So in a place like Minneapolis, that's located in Hennepin County, there's a few laws that are pretty good that we have. The first is that in the city of Minneapolis, it is prohibited for MPD or the Minneapolis Police Department to ask somebody about their immigration status. While that is helpful, is that if MPD pulls someone over, they actually can't ask them, hey, do you have papers? Are you documented? They're not allowed to do that. That doesn't mean, unfortunately, sometimes they might still do it, but technically, according to the law, they're not supposed to do that. And that's good because it means that even if someone ends up in the jail, the police don't know necessarily if someone is undocumented or not. But obviously, we don't want people to end up in the jail in the first place, but it definitely is a little bit of protection that this law exists. And then in the county level, in Hennepin County, in 2020, Minnesota 8 was a part of a group of other organizations, including ACER, I think, too, trying to pressure the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office to pass a directive. So this directive does 2 things. The first thing is that it prohibits the sheriff's office from holding an immigrant or refugee for ICE without a judicial warrant. So a judicial warrant has to be signed by a judge. And in the past, before this was passed as a policy in the sheriff's office could actually hold somebody for 48 hours after their usual release date because they were holding them for ICE to give ICE time to drive to the jail and wait outside the jail and pick up the person. So now this is not allowed anymore unless a federal judge has signed off on that. So there are unfortunately still exceptions. The other second part of the directive or the policy that was passed is that it prohibits the sheriff's office from notifying ICE about an immigrant or a refugee coming in or leaving the jail. So that is definitely some good news, where an officer can't pick up the phone and call ICE, or if ICE wants to call the sheriff's office, they're not allowed to pick up the phone, or if they pick up the phone, they can't say anything. They just say like, we decline to answer. So this is definitely more protection than your average county in Minnesota, I will say honestly, unfortunately. But Minnesota Aid and many other incredible organizations we are trying to make this more universal throughout Minnesota, and to also make the things that we already have, such as these policies you see, more concrete and less loopholes in them. So next slide, please. So the last part of my presentation that I'll talk about is what are me and my neighbor's rights. And I have a little bit of help from our friends over at Puente Human Rights Movement in Arizona, the Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights, as well as Mi Gente. They have a Know Your Rights workbook that I have included a lot of things from. And I am also going to drop the whole full workbook in the chat, so you all can look at it as well on your own time. But in the meantime, Juan, could you go to the next slide? Thank you. So this is one of the pages in that workbook. This talks about how everyone has rights, even if you are an immigrant, even if you're a refugee, even if you don't have legal documentation, you do have rights. Your rights might be a little bit different depending on your documentation, but everyone has the right to privacy, has the right to due process, the right to freedom of speech, the right to remain silent, the right from discrimination, and the right to assemble. Next slide, please. And I'm just going to focus on one part, because the rights that you have while you're in your house are different from the rights you have when you're driving, or when you're at work, or when you're on the street. So I am just going to focus on the rights you have at home. So in your home, that's where you actually have the most protection. If ICE raids your home, or a neighbor's home, or someone you know's home, you or they have the right to not open the door and let them in. The only way that ICE and police can enter is if they have a judicial warrant. So we talked about that earlier. A judicial warrant is one that's signed by a federal judge. Sometimes, unfortunately, ICE might even slip a piece of paper in and it's actually a fake warrant. So they'll try lots of tricks. So on the right side, you see this little italics. So it says like, be careful, because ICE agents want you to let them in. They will use tricks and lies to get people to open the door. They might show you a picture of someone else. They might try to talk to you, ask for your information, or show you a paper and pretend it's a judicial warrant. They might pretend to be the police. And unfortunately, if they can't get into your home, they might also lurk nearby and stop you on the street. And that's definitely very dangerous, because you have less rights when you are outside of your home, or if you're walking around, than you are in your home. So unfortunately and fortunately, there are rights you have when you're at home, but outside of your home, it's not as many rights. Next slide, please. I think, yeah, that is actually my last slide, because I knew I had a limited time and already went 6 minutes over. But this is my contact information. Feel free to take it down. I'll put it in the chat. This is my email and this is my phone number. Please note, this is not a rapid response hotline. It's my cell number. So I will respond to you, but I'm not always actively checking. But I just wanted to put my contact information out there in case there are any follow-up questions you have or just anything you want to learn more about. So thank you again, Juan and Homeline, for having me. And I definitely encourage folks to look at that Know Your Rights pamphlet I posted. And I'll also put the link to our website. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, so much for the resources that you shared tonight. And thank you, Ricardo, and thank you, Fatima, for sharing your experiences in the community. Thank you, all three of you, for the time that you dedicated tonight. This next slide here is legal resources. I will throw in the caveat there. They are not free legal resources. But yes, if folks are interested in any of these, please use this resources if you are interested. Thank you to Rebecca for providing this resource, and actually the folks at Interfaith Coalition on Immigration for the list. And then we'll jump into the Q&A portion of the webinar. If folks have any questions, please use the chat section or the specific Q&A section. And myself or any of the three panelists, the wonderful panelists that we have here tonight, will be happy to answer any of your questions.
And just
Also remind,
go
ahead, Erin.
Just a tech note that if anyone attending would like to speak out their question out loud or would like to share something via audio, then just raise your hand if you can, or put in the chat that you'd like to do so, and then I can mute you. Yeah.
Thank you, Erin. Also reminded of folks, the slides and the actual webinar itself that was recorded will be shared once we get everything published and finished. It'll be shared on our website under our tenant organizing webinars. Because it'll be the most recent one, it should be at the top. And we'll have the slides and all the resources. You'll have access to all the resources that were shared within the slides as well. So yeah, thank you.
Maybe I'll jump in with a question to Fatima and Ricardo, my co-panelists. I'm curious, like for you both, I know this panel is focused on like mixed status families, but maybe we can just expand to just like working with immigrants and refugees related to housing. Like what has been like one of the biggest challenges you faced, and what is one of the biggest successes that you faced? Because we got to make it more than just the sad parts.
You
I
can
can
go
go
first, Perumo. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I think the biggest challenge is at first there is a hesitation to organize. But after that, I think the strength is that usually immigrant communities have stronger ties to community. And so they usually come from collectivist societies where people do support each other and have each other's back. And so once they feel comfortable enough to organize, it builds momentum, and it's way easier forward. And compare that to like a general American building. Although people aren't as hesitant to organize, it takes a lot more to get the train going, if you will. But that's what I think. And eventually, I think once people realize that they do have rights and their rights do protect them, they become even more empowered, even way before they knew about their rights. Because at first, like everything seems like it's legally, like it has immigration implications, but then people learn about their rights, and that's where like our strongest tenants or tenant leaders are actually people who are like immigrationally vulnerable, if you will. Like they might have a green card, or maybe they don't have a green card, and but it's not always someone who's a citizen that is our strongest leaders. Yeah.
Awesome. That was great. No, and I agree. That's why I love immigrant community, because we're like very loyal, very hardworking, and I completely agree with you, Fatima. So that's super cool. And for me, I guess like, yeah, similarly, I think it's like the weight of the public narrative or the dominant culture is too heavy sometimes for one family or individual to break through and to say, yes, I can change this, you know? And yeah, it's kind of like hard to sometimes door knock and people don't come out. You know, it's like heartbreaking sometimes, you know, because you know they're there, their shoes are outside, you can smell the food and you can hear the TV, but they're, you know, rather not. And I see where they're coming from. But then on the other side of that coin, and maybe this is a different campaign than the one in a building, but in the city of Richfield, and it's about asking questions, right? The curiosity that can lead to change and the intentionality to bring immigrant issues to agendas. In the city of Richfield, they have a program called Kids at Home that kind of like helps subsidize rent for families who are enrolled in the public school system. And we come to realize that they were enforcing an immigration rule within the city about showing your immigration, so show proof of citizenship. And this Richfield was one of the only cities that I came across in Hennepin County that was implementing this rule. And after we asked questions and we met with the city and we asked to see the numbers, they were able to bring down that requirement. And now any families, regardless of their immigration status, can apply to get this program. Now, not so sweet at the end, like if you were to check today how many more families have applied, I don't think the numbers are changing a lot. So that just talks about how important changing the narrative, the culture is, and it's gonna take us a long time, you know? So, yeah. And how about you, Rebecca? I just wanna say that was one of the most awesome, concrete, educational pieces of information on immigration I have ever received. So maybe like throwing it back to you, how about you though? Because it's so interesting that we both like represent or work with perhaps very different communities, but it's very similar experience. Could you maybe share your victory and kind of like the other one too?
Yeah, thank you. Oh, that's so kind of you to say. It's been one of the most like concise and helpful pieces of things that you've seen. And I'm sure you've seen many things. For me, I think starting with the challenge and then ending on the success, I feel like very similar to you all. A lot of community members are scared to reach out, and specifically in the Southeast Asian community, because oftentimes these deportation orders are coming from their convictions from like decades ago. These people have had the deportation order for like 20, 30, 40 years. And they've been doing their check-ins of ICE because ICE does make them check in at the office regularly. But a lot of them feel scared to reach out for help. And a lot of them also feel like, why should I rock the boat? Like, I'm checking in, they're not deporting me. It's not the best situation, but it's not the worst situation. Like if I make a fuss about my case, will they deport me? Which is a really valid fear, especially when you already have a family, you have kids, you have maybe older parents who you have to support. I understand why you wouldn't want to rock the boat. And I came from a family who didn't like to rock the boat either. So I would say just being able to develop that sort of trust with community members, it's a challenge because it just takes time, I think. It takes time for community to see what you're doing, to know that you're trusted, that you're not just some random people, you're going to be there for the long haul. Sometimes they're also scared. You're pretending you're ICE actually, and you're just pretending to be someone else. Like it's really unfortunate that the fear is so deeply rooted. So I would say that's one of the challenges. I guess another one that I think is also important to share is the stigma, especially because in our community, a lot of the people have committed crimes in their past, there's a really big stigma against them. There are a lot of Southeast Asians who will say to other people, oh, they did a crime, I'm not supporting them, or why should I help them? They did something wrong. But a lot of times, that's why I share that really big, deep, like pipeline slide. Like, yes, people did do something wrong, but sometimes it was a crime of poverty. Sometimes it was because they were in a gang and that was the only sense of protection or community they had. Sometimes they were in the wrong place in the wrong time. Like, there's a lot of stories that I've heard of people just telling me like how they ended up where they are, and just the circumstances were all just really bad. And that's why they ended up being arrested and going to jail and then going to ICE detention. So I think working through the stigma is real. You know, we're our own community's harshest critics sometimes. And because there's this good immigrant, bad immigrant narrative, the bad immigrants are the ones who get thrown under the bus because people say things about how good immigrants are and exclude the bad immigrants, the quote unquote bad immigrants from things. And that's a very dangerous narrative. On the flip side, I would say the successes that I've had so far, I would say connecting with community members and hearing their stories, like that is something that is so like precious to me, that I always just feel like when someone does want to open up to me and they do share their story, I just feel so grateful because I'm literally a stranger to them, but they are willing to trust me. And I just value that trust so deeply, and being able to support them, to help them find the legal resources they need, and to also help them amplify their voice, help them know that like, I know you're scared, but you have a voice, you deserve to share your story, and you are going to be protected by like our community when you share your story. It's not perfectly without, it's not like there's 100% no risk. Of course, there's always going to be a risk, but you have people around you who are willing to protect you and care for you and like try to make sure that your story gets told so that other people are not going to face the same situation you are. So I feel just incredibly lucky to be able to hear those stories and to support community members. So yeah, that's my challenges and my success.
Thank you all three of you for sharing such beautiful challenges and successes in your work. I want to jump in here as well. I want to take the advantage of jumping in as well. I'll take Rebecca's approach to studying with challenges. And all three of you really shared this aspect too. And I think it's a really important aspect when we're organizing, and community in general, all types of communities, is the importance of trust, like the importance of establishing that trust, really demonstrating, as a tenant organizer, the way I demonstrate trust and like relationship building is just being able to show up, like being able to constantly showing up, if that's showing up every day, if it's showing up once a week, if it's showing up monthly, it has very different ways of you showing up for folks and really demonstrating to folks that you actually truly care. And you're not just here to fluff your resume or for whatever the ulterior motives might be, but the motive is actually the residents themselves. It's their motive. You're really being able to demonstrate that is a challenge in some cases. Like that trust, that building that trust is really the most important part when trying to organize in any community, but even specifically in any immigrant community. If you violate that trust, it's very hard to get that trust back. So it's very important that like when navigating that relationship, that you aren't taking those relationships for granted, that when you are extending trust and you're inviting others to trust you, that you're really taking that agreement seriously, because there's really serious consequences afterwards if that trust is violated. Not physical or anything like that, but it's just consequences in the relationship. So I just wanted to stress that. In my own experience, it's been, we have trial and error in some cases, so I definitely learned from my mistakes, and I'm really grateful to those community members that really showed me where my faults were, and I grew a lot from that. So I want to just share that with folks tonight as well. And success is, you know, it's very similar to Rebecca. It's always really great when folks break out of that, you know, shell of fear. Really, it's an incredible sight to see when folks really take their power and run with it. You know, it's you know, it's more than just like being able to move a movement and being able to like improve lives, but it's really like you really just see the shift in someone's mind. And that really unlocks so many different things for a person, because it's so common in organizing that yeah, we might be encountering folks for a very specific reason that they may be dealing with in the immediate moment, but then comes to find out that there's another thing that's more pressing on their mind that you kind of have to deal with first. And not all of those are related to exactly what we all work in, and housing specifically. Some of them really vary quite away from housing. But it's really like being able to like assist someone and being able to overcome whatever it is that they're experiencing, and being able to see who they are after that process. It's really, truly something incredible. So yeah, I really want to thank our panelists tonight, and I really want to thank folks for joining in tonight and taking time out of your evenings to join us. If there are any questions, please send them in our way. We have a few minutes still, so please take advantage of that. Otherwise, I'm happy to give folks 7 minutes back of their time. But yes, thank you again.
There is a request for a screen. Oh, you got it. Yeah.
Let's, Erin, do you know how to take a screenshot?
Yes, I can do that.
Also, would you mind jumping in with us as well?
I'll jump in. All right. I think I'm getting it. All right, cheese, 1, 2, 3. Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. This is really an honor. It was a privilege to have everyone. And Rebecca, thank you. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, Ricardo. I appreciate all three of you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really good to meet you both, Fatima and Ricardo, and to see you both again, Erin and Juan.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Nice to meet you.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you all who joined tonight. All right, goodbye.